January 24, 1942. Bataan Peninsula, Luzon, Philippine Islands. The morning air is already thick with heat when the engines arrive. At first, it sounds like distant thunder rolling in from Manila Bay, a low, steady growl that doesn't belong to the jungle. Captain Maud Davison, U.S. Army Nurse Corps, looks up from a blood-soaked bandage just as the sound sharpens into something unmistakable. Aircraft. Many of them. Someone shouts from outside the ward, a single word cracking through the humid air like a rifle shot. Bombers. The Nipa walls of hospital know, to shudder as the first explosions slam into the hillside nearby. Dust rains down from the rafters. Canvas beds jerk under wounded bodies. Somewhere glass shatters. Somewhere else a man screams, not from pain this time but from terror. Davison doesn't move. She tightens the knot on the bandage around a private's thigh, presses her palm into the wound, and leans closer so he can hear her over the rising roar. "Hold still," she says calmly. "You're going to be all right." Outside, Japanese Mitsubishi G-3M bombers sweep low over the peninsula, their silver bellies flashing between palm trees. They are not aiming at airfields today. They are aiming at hospitals. The red crosses painted on the roofs mean nothing now. Bataan has been under siege for weeks. American and Filipino forces, starving, sick, exhausted, have been pushed back again and again, retreating deeper into the peninsula. Malaria stalks the camps. Dysentery fills the wards. Ammunition is rationed. Food is a memory. And still the nurses stay. Captain Davison is 34 years old, from Minnesota, with hair pinned tight beneath her cap and a uniform bleached pale by tropical sun. Like the other women of the Army Nurse Corps, she arrived in the Philippines before the war, expecting routine duty at a peacetime post. Instead, she found herself thrown into a collapsing front line. The wounded never stop coming. They are carried in on doors, on stretchers made from bamboo poles, on the backs of other soldiers. Shrapnel wounds. Burns. Crushed limbs from artillery fire. Men coughing blood from lung infections that medicine can no longer touch. The bombing draws closer. A blast tears into the tree line, less than 100 yards away. The concussion knocks Davison off balance. She catches herself against the operating table as the lights flicker, then go out completely. Darkness. For half a second, no one breathes. Then the ward erupts into chaos. Get down. Medic. Jesus. Another bomb hits. The ground jumps. The walls groan like a ship taking on water. Somewhere the ceiling collapses. Davison snaps into motion. "Lanterns," she orders. "Keep the patients on the floor if you can't move them. Cover the wounds." She drops to her knees beside a corporal whose chest is wrapped in gauze already soaked crimson. Without electricity, without morphine, without enough plasma, she works by feel and instinct. Her hands move automatically, clamp, pressure, tie, the training drilled into her at Walter Reed now tested under fire. You can hear the bombers overhead now, close enough to rattle teeth. The whistle of falling bombs cuts through the air, followed by detonations that shake the earth like a living thing trying to tear itself apart. A nurse named Lieutenant Ruth Miles crawls across the floor, shielding an unconscious patient with her own body as debris crashes down around them. Another nurse drags a tray of surgical instruments into a shallow trench carved into the dirt floor, a desperate attempt to save what little they have. Someone begins to pray out loud. The hospital is not fortified. It is not armed. It was never meant to be a target. But the Japanese pilots know exactly what they are doing. Intelligence reports have already warned of deliberate strikes against medical facilities across the peninsula. The rules of war have changed. A bomb detonates directly behind the ward. The blast hurls Davison forward, slamming her shoulder into the ground. Her ears ring. For a moment, the world dissolves into dust and noise and heat. When her hearing returns, the first thing she registers is silence. No engines. No explosions. Just moaning. Crying. The crackle of small fires starting in the brush outside. Davison pushes herself up, her hands shaking, her uniform torn and streaked with dirt and blood, not all of it hers. Around her, the ward is barely recognizable. One wall has collapsed completely. Beds lie overturned. A nurse sits against a post, staring at her hands, lips moving without sound. Davison forces herself to stand. They are still alive. And that means the work is not over. She takes a breath, lifts her voice, and begins again. Everyone who can move, help the wounded. We stay, we don't leave them. Outside, smoke rises over Bataan, marking another step in the slow, brutal collapse of American defenses. Inside the shattered hospital, a handful of nurses refuse to surrender. Not to fear, not to fire, not yet. January 24, 1942. Afternoon. Bataan Peninsula. The smoke does not clear quickly. It hangs low over the jungle, mixing with the sour smell of burned canvas, antiseptic, and blood. Captain Maud Davison steps outside what remains of Hospital No. 2 and squints into the light, her ears still ringing. Palm fronds burn where they fell. A bomb crater yawns open less than 50 yards from the ward, its edges still crumbling. For a brief, dangerous moment, it feels over. Then someone points upward. The engines are back. This time the sound is sharper, faster, a higher pitch slicing through the air. Not bombers now, but fighters diving low. Davison recognizes the silhouette as they break through the smoke. Mitsubishi A6M0s, their wings rocking as they descend. They are strafing. The first burst of machine gun fire rips across the clearing, stitching the ground with spurts of dirt and splinters. A jeep explodes in a shower of flame and twisted metal. Men scatter for cover, dragging stretchers behind them. Inside, someone screams. Davison doesn't hesitate. She grabs the nearest wounded man, a Filipino private with a bandaged head, and hauls him toward the wrecked ward. Bullets crack overhead, snapping through palm trunks with a sound like breaking bones. The Red Cross flags flap uselessly in the downdraft of passing aircraft. Inside, the nurses press themselves flat as gunfire chews through the walls. Canvas tears. Medical crates splinter. A steel surgical tray spins across the floor, ringing like a bell. This is not a battlefield mistake. It is deliberate. Davison feels it settle into her chest like a stone. The strafing passes last only minutes, but they feel endless. When the last fighter pulls away, the silence that follows is heavier than the noise that came before. A silence filled with the knowledge that they can come back anytime. And they will. The casualties multiply instantly. A medic staggers in with blood pouring from his forearm. A nurse collapses to her knees, stunned by flying debris. Outside, 2 orderlies lie motionless near the supply tent, their stretchers abandoned. Davison moves from patient to patient, her mind narrowing to tasks. Tie. Press. Reassure. She gives orders without raising her voice. Panic spreads fast in a place like this. Calm is contagious too. Late in the afternoon, word arrives from headquarters. Prepare to move. The Japanese are pushing harder along the WWII line. The hospitals are no longer behind the lines. They are in them. Command has decided to evacuate medical personnel further down the peninsula. It sounds simple. It is not. Many of the wounded cannot walk. Trucks are scarce. Fuel is rationed. The roads are cratered, choked with refugees and retreating units. And moving during daylight risks another air attack. Davison gathers the nurses, 12 women, their faces gray with exhaustion, eyes red from smoke and shock. Some have been awake for more than 36 hours. We take who we can, she tells them. We do not leave anyone unattended. If they can't be moved, we stay with them until the last possible moment. No one argues. As dusk falls, they begin the evacuation. Stretchers are lifted, lowered, lifted again. Men groan as fractured bones shift. Morphine is measured drop by drop. Lanterns are shaded to avoid drawing attention from the air. The jungle closes in around the column as they move south, a slow, painful procession under a sky turning red and purple with sunset. Somewhere far off, artillery thumps steadily, like a giant heartbeat. Halfway down the road, they hear it again. Engines. This time the nurses don't wait to see. They drag the stretchers off the road and into the undergrowth, pressing bodies flat beneath leaves and branches. Davison crouches over a young American private, whose eyes are wide with terror. "Don't move," she whispers. "No matter what." The Zeros pass overhead, so low she can see the pilot's goggles glinting in the fading light. No shots this time. Just a reminder. You are not safe. Not anywhere. Night finally brings cover and new horrors. Without light, the road becomes a trap. Men stumble into shell holes. A stretcher slips, dropping its occupant into the dirt with a cry that echoes too loudly. Davison bites down hard, forcing herself not to shout as she helps lift him back up. By the time they reach the next improvised hospital site, a cluster of tents hidden beneath thick jungle canopy, dawn is approaching. They have saved dozens. They have lost others. Davison sinks onto a crate as the wounded are settled, her hands trembling uncontrollably now that the adrenaline fades. Her uniform is stiff with dried blood. She cannot remember the last time she ate. Above the trees, the sky begins to lighten. Another day in Bataan is beginning. And with it comes the unspoken realization that settles over everyone still alive on the peninsula. Soldiers, nurses, commanders alike. This is not a battle that can be won. Only endured. January 26, 1942. Southern Bataan. Dawn does not bring relief. It brings heat. The sun climbs fast, burning away the thin mist clinging to the jungle floor and revealing what the night tried to hide. Rows of wounded men lying under canvas, flies already gathering at bandages that can no longer be changed often enough. The new hospital site is little more than a clearing carved out of dense vegetation, its tents sagging under humidity and exhaustion. Captain Maud Davison wakes where she collapsed, sitting upright against a crate of dwindling medical supplies. Her neck aches. Her hands are swollen and cracked. For a moment, she doesn't know where she is. Then the coughing starts. A deep, wet rattle echoes through the tents. Malaria, pneumonia, tuberculosis, diseases that thrive when armies starve and sleep in mud. Davison pushes herself up and gets back to work without thinking. There is no other option. The flow of casualties intensifies by mid-morning. The Japanese have broken through sections of the American-Filipino defensive line. Units retreat in fragments, squads without officers, officers without units. Men arrive barefoot, uniforms shredded, eyes glazed with shock. Some collapse before reaching the tents. A lieutenant from the 31st Infantry grabs Davison by the arm, his voice hoarse. "They're coming fast," he says. "Artillery, tanks, we can't hold the road." She nods, already moving. She has heard this before. Every day the front comes closer. By noon, the hospital is under indirect fire. Shells land somewhere beyond the trees, close enough to shower leaves and dirt onto the tents. The wounded flinch with each distant blast. Davison moves among them, her presence steady, almost defiant, as if refusing to acknowledge the enemy might somehow keep them at bay. In the early afternoon, a stretcher team rushes in with a Filipino sergeant whose leg has been nearly torn away by shrapnel. There is no time, no equipment, no blood to spare. The surgeon looks at Davison and shakes his head. "We can't save it." Davison holds the man's hand as the ether mask is lowered. His eyes search hers, filled with fear and trust in equal measure. "It won't hurt long," she tells him quietly. Outside, another shell lands close enough to make the tent poles jump. The realization spreads through the medical staff with a quiet, terrible clarity. They are being overrun. Orders arrive just before sunset. Written in pencil. smudged with sweat. Prepare for possible capture. The words hang in the air, heavier than any explosion. Davison gathers the nurses again. Some stare at the ground. One wipes her eyes angrily with the back of her hand. "We stay professional," Davison says. "No matter what happens next, we are officers of the United States Army." No one needs her to explain what capture might mean. Stories have already filtered in, of brutal treatment of prisoners beaten or worse, of nurses who may not be protected by their uniforms or their rank. Night falls with an unnatural stillness. No planes, no shells, just insects and the distant murmur of an enemy army closing in. Davison lies awake on her cot, listening to the jungle breathe. She thinks of home, of snow, of clean sheets, of silence. She wonders briefly if she will ever see them again. Before dawn, the firing resumes. Not heavy bombardment. Rifle fire. Close. Too close. By mid-morning, Japanese infantry appear at the edge of the clearing, helmets bobbing, rifles leveled. An American officer steps forward, hands raised, a white cloth tied to his pistol. It is over. The Japanese commander walks through the hospital slowly, his expression unreadable as he surveys the wounded, the nurses, the chaos. He says nothing to Davison, only nods once before issuing curt orders to his men. The nurses are ordered to assemble. Davison stands with them, shoulders back, chin up, even as fear coils tight in her stomach. Around them, the wounded moan softly. Some reach out, as if afraid the nurses will disappear. For the first time since the bombing, Davison feels truly powerless. They are prisoners now, and the war is no longer something happening around them. It has closed its hand. January 27, 1942. Somewhere on the road south of Bataan. They are given barely an hour to prepare. Personal belongings are limited to what can be carried by hand. Medical kits are confiscated or searched. The wounded are left behind under Japanese guard, a decision that tears at the nurses more than the capture itself. Captain Maud Davison watches as stretchers are pulled away from her reach, men calling her name, begging her not to go. She memorizes their faces. The column forms quickly. Nurses first, then doctors, then enlisted medical personnel. Rifles point from every direction. The road ahead shimmers in the heat, already crowded with American and Filipino prisoners moving north. The march begins. Davison keeps her eyes forward, matching her pace to the nurse beside her. They are not struck, not yet, but the threat is constant, a presence felt in every shouted order and snapped command in a language few of them understand. The sun climbs mercilessly. Within an hour, sweat soaks through their uniforms. Water is scarce. When a nurse stumbles, Davison reaches out to steady her before a guard notices. Compassion must be quiet now. They pass burned-out vehicles, abandoned artillery, bodies left where they fell. Flies cloud the air. The smell of death is inescapable. This is the opening movement of what will become known as the Bataan Death March, though no one marching yet knows that name. They only know that the road never seems to end. At a roadside halt, Davison watches a group of wounded prisoners being forced to stand. One collapses. A guard raises his rifle. A Japanese officer intervenes with a sharp command. The rifle lowers. The man is dragged back to his feet. The mercy feels arbitrary, unreliable. By late afternoon, the nurses are separated from the main column and redirected toward Manila. The change brings no relief, only uncertainty. Trucks are rumored. None arrive. They sleep that night in an open field, no shelter, no blankets. Davison lies awake again, staring at unfamiliar stars, listening to distant gunfire and closer sobbing. She thinks of the men they left behind in Bataan, men who may already be dead. In the morning they are moved again, this time by train. The rail cars are packed tight, wooden slats digging into backs and shoulders. The heat inside is suffocating. Davison braces herself against the wall as the train lurches forward, carrying them north into occupied territory. Hours later, they arrive in Manila. The city looks almost peaceful from a distance, buildings intact, streets quiet. It feels like another world compared to Batan's ruin. The illusion lasts only until they are herded through guarded gates and into the grounds of Santo Tomas University. The campus has been transformed into an internment camp. Classrooms are barracks. Athletic fields are crowded with tents. Barbed wire lines the perimeter. Thousands of civilians, Americans, British, Filipinos, watch silently as the nurses arrive. Davison feels the weight of their eyes. They are registered, counted, assigned quarters. The nurses are housed together, given a single room with bare floors and shuttered windows. It is cramped, but it is shelter. For the first time in weeks, there is no bombing. The silence is unsettling. In the days that follow, reality settles in slowly, painfully. Food rations are meager: rice, watery soup, occasionally a few vegetables. Malnutrition begins its quiet work. Illness spreads through the camp. Davison resumes nursing almost immediately. There are no supplies, no medicines. She improvises, boiling water to sterilize cloth, tearing uniforms into bandages, using calm words where drugs should be. The other internees begin calling them the angels. At night, Davison writes notes in a small, hidden notebook, names, dates, fragments of memory. She does not know why. Only that someday, someone must remember this. She listens to the distant city sounds beyond the wire and wonders how long the world will take to find them. Weeks turn into months. The war moves on without them. And yet, inside the camp, Captain Maud Davison survives, not by fighting, but by refusing to surrender the part of herself that the enemy cannot touch. Her duty. Late 1942. Santo Tomas Internment Camp, Manila. Time loses its shape inside the wire. Days are no longer measured by calendars, but by hunger, by the thin ladle of rice in the morning, by the slow drag toward night when stomachs ache and bodies feel lighter than they should. Captain Maud Davison watches this transformation happen to everyone, including herself. Cheekbones sharpen. Uniforms hang loose. Voices grow quieter. But the nurses do not stop. Each morning, Davison rises before roll call. She washes her face with cold water from a shared basin and pins her hair as neatly as she can. It is not vanity. It is discipline. A reminder to herself and to anyone watching that she is still an officer. The camp hospital is a former classroom. Desks have been pushed aside. Chalkboards still bear half-erased equations. On the floor, men and women lie shoulder to shoulder, feverish, skeletal, some barely conscious. Dysentery spreads fast. Beriberi follows. There are no antibiotics, no quinine, no morphine. Davison treats what she can and comforts what she cannot. She learns to read the guards, which ones look away, which ones linger, which ones can be approached with careful politeness. On rare occasions, she manages to secure extra scraps of food for the sickest patients. Each success feels like a small victory stolen from an enemy who believes suffering is deserved. Rumors drift through the camp like smoke. American forces regrouping. A counteroffensive somewhere in the Pacific. Guadalcanal. Midway. Names that sound almost unreal. Hope becomes dangerous but impossible to suppress. In early 1943, a bombing raid hits Manila. From inside the camp, Davison hears the familiar sound of aircraft engines and flinches, her body remembering Bataan before her mind can stop it. This time, though, the bombs fall on Japanese positions. The guards look uneasy. For the first time, Davison allows herself to believe the war might reach them again, from the other direction. Months later, Allied aircraft roar overhead in greater numbers. Anti-aircraft fire rattles the night sky. The ground trembles. The camp buzzes with whispers, eyes lifted toward freedom that feels close enough to touch. Then suddenly, in February 1945, the shooting is close. Very close. Gunfire cracks just beyond the walls. Explosions echo through the streets of Manila. The guards grow nervous, then violent, then confused. Some flee. Others barricade themselves inside buildings. Davison is in the hospital room when it happens. A distant explosion is followed by the unmistakable sound of American voices shouting orders. Rifle fire answers back. Then silence, broken by cheers that start small and spread like wildfire through the camp. The gates open. U.S. Army Rangers pour in, weapons raised, eyes wide at the sight before them. Skeletal prisoners. Tattered uniforms. Nurses standing at attention despite everything. Davison feels her knees weaken. She grips the edge of a table to stay upright. An American officer approaches her, his voice catching as he salutes. "Ma'am, you're free." For a moment she cannot speak. Later, much later, she walks out of Santo Tomas under an open sky. The air smells different. The city is in ruins, but to her it looks like rebirth. She will return home thinner, quieter, changed forever. But she will return. Captain Maud Davison survived bombing raids, starvation, and captivity, not because she was untouched by fear, but because she refused to let fear decide who she was. In the darkest moments of the Pacific War, when hospitals burned and mercy vanished from the skies, she chose to stay, to heal, to endure.